Folks, that there's a sign-in table at the back, my left, and you can also sign up for public comment there. Public comment's pretty early on in the meeting, so if you wanted to sign up for that, just make sure and do that in the next few minutes. There's also hand sanitizer. If anybody wants to sanitize their hands, please don't steal it. So our committee member who is on deck today to do the opening inspiration is running a little bit late, so we're gonna, we may kind of stop the meeting when he arrives and put him on the spot to do that then. But in the meantime, I think that we just want to call this meeting to order and begin with introductions. We always begin with the committee members and then move around the rest of the table and then into the audience. James Valdez, who's setting up chairs right now, is PCEF member extraordinaire, is going to be holding the mic. So in the interest of not sharing germs, we're just going to have him kind of be the mic holder rather than passing it down the aisle as we usually do. So with that, if Maria, if you could start.
Maria Sippin, she, they, pronouns.
Shanice Clark, she, they pronouns.
Megan Horst, she, her.
Rain Feast, Genitino Viatoro, he, him.
Jeffrey Moreland, he, him.
Faith Graham, she, her.
Robin Wayne, he, him.
And PCEF staff, Sam Barrasso, he, him.
And then I think we do have one committee member on the phone. Andrea?
Yes, hi, this is Andrea Hamburg, committee member, she, her, and my apologies that I'm not in the room, although you're all glad not to have my cold.
And Katie Lister, PCEF staff, she, her.
And, oh, is Mike on here? Yeah. James Valdez, PCEF staff. I'm going to go around and, nope, no. Is this mic on? Nope. There we go. Hi, everyone. James Valdez, PCEF staff. I'm going to hold the mic and
Jose McLaskis, he, him, Verde.
Tony DeFalco, he, him at Verde.
Jay Richmond, they, them, Oregon tradeswomen.
Kenichi Inyagasi, she, her, Professional Business Development Group.
Maurice Ramming, O'Neill Construction Group, he, him, his.
Richard Hunter, NAACP, he, him.
Josh Baker, he, him, Lloyd Eco District.
Ryan Lapoma, Earth Advantage, he, him.
Amanda Watson, she, her, Mayor's Office.
Dan Poco, he, him, Lewis and Clark Law School.
Carrie Ng, she, hers, Lewis and Clark Law School.
back around the other way. Do a little dance around here.
Marley Klaas, she, her, Lewis and Clark Law School.
Ben Criswell, he, him, Lewis and Clark Law School.
Sarah Salzberg, she, her, Mossy Tree Care.
Joe Nazzaro, he, him.
Yeah, Mark D'Arienzo, he, him, Climate Jobs, Jobs with Justice.
Serbi Mahajan, she, her, Friends of Trees.
Pat Daniels, Constructing Hope, she, her.
Patrick Gearing, he, him, from Work Systems.
Kelly Haynes, she, her, Work Systems.
Steve Sims, Bureau of Labor and Industries, he, him.
Andrew McGough, Work Systems, he, him.
And in the back here.
Randy Ramos, RG Ramos Construction Electrical.
And I'll grab some more chairs here in just a little bit.
James Matoir, Earth Advantage, he, him.
Coming to the back row.
Scott Shepard, he, him, Lewis and Clark Law.
Isaac Barrow, he, him, PGE.
James Donnelly, Elevate Energy.
Angela Crowley-Cook, OSEA, Oregon Solar Energy Industries Association.
Jenny Hall, Energy Trust of Oregon Solar Program, she, her.
Deidre Sheets, Nutrition Garden RX, she, her.
Lisa Hubbard, she, they, Service Employees Local 49.
Cole May, he, him, Lewis and Clark Sustainability Office.
Come back around.
Cosmo K, she, them, Lewis and Clark College.
Alejandro Saucedo, Energy Trust of Oregon Residential Program.
Janet Hammer, she, her, PCEF staff.
Nate McCoy, Namac, Oregon, he, him.
Gail Palmer, she, her, East Portland Action Plan, Centennial Community Association.
All right, and we always are thankful for our friends at Open Signal, so you don't get off the hook.
Tony Prato, he, him.
Oh, I got you right while you're eating. You can pass if you want. Okay. Thank you, though. All right, I think we got everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, James.
Okay. I want to just appreciate everyone for showing up today in the space, given everything that's playing out. And I want to just acknowledge that we are taking feedback and guidance from the County Health Department as well as the City Bureau of Emergency Management and Bureau of Human Resources around us hosting these events. I want to acknowledge that this is also a conversation that's changing by the minute. And so there's a likelihood that our next committee meetings may not necessarily be in person like this. So it's in some ways an opportunity to test this out with Andrea being remote, but we will be likely thinking through, and we are thinking through as a staff, is how we continue moving this conversation, recognizing that we may be in the short term not necessarily being able to have these sorts of meetings and these sorts of gatherings. So I just want to acknowledge that and note that we are certainly thinking through that. We've made just, we've shifted some of the food options in the back, so there's single wrap, as much as that changes the environmental options, but single wrap and hand sanitizer. But please recognize that there's always call-in options for folks, and we're going to think through how to make that more accessible over time. And so there is there's one additional person actually on the phone, and I'll chop in that in a second. But, and so I want to at least start out with stating that and say that we are exploring what it's going to look like, and that may involve also changing our agendas over the next coming meetings to facilitate those maybe potentially not in-person meetings. So thank you all for coming here and stay tuned, and please keep an eye out on the agendas, because we'll keep folks up to date as to whether or not we are holding in-person meetings moving forward. And with that, there is one additional person on the line. If you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, they might need to be unmuted. Just a second. They appear to be muted on their own end.
Okay. All right.
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yes, we can.
It's Kathy Shirk with the City of Portland COEP program.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so the first order of business is just to approve or amend the minutes from the February 27th meeting. Did anyone have any changes or edits to the minutes from February 27th? Nope. All right, I'm going to start sneaking some stuff in there, so just to make sure you guys are actually reading them, but I'll just assume that we're doing a really stellar job of capturing what's said. All right, thank you. So the next order of business is for public comment, and I'd like to invite Jose from Verde up to make public comment, and I'm going to go and check, but you can sit right there and then just make sure that the light in front of you is green.
Good evening, Grant Committee and PCEF staff. I am Jose Michalowskis, and I work at Verde. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening in support of the good work of this committee and the broader PCEF program. On behalf of the PCEF Coalition, I'm here to share information about our coalition's workforce and contractor equity efforts. Our hope is that our efforts add value to your process as you think through how to realize the initiative's deep commitment to economic opportunity in frontline communities. We invited coalition members to participate in a workforce and contractor equity group, and I'm happy to share that many of the coalition's workforce and contractor organizations signed up. The list includes Mudbone Grown, IBEW, SEI, Zenger Farms, Friends of Trees, Community Energy Project, Constructing Hope, Latino Build / Home Energy Life and Performance Group, NAMCO, Home Performance Guild, and Verde. Today, I'd like to share with you the vision statement that we developed together. In 5 years, PCEF has meaningfully invested the success of a growing, diverse group of nonprofits and contractors to lead and construct PCEF projects. These organizations collaborate with the resource training sector to recruit, train, hire/retain, and consistently engage/support new workers and contractors from target communities. Thank you again for the chance to share this vision with you. We hope you consider it useful as you think through how to build towards a new justice-based green economy, and we look forward to building it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. So one other person signed up for public comment, Tyrone Henry. Oh. It looked like a Y, so I guess we don't have anyone else signed up for public comment. With that, Ranfeast, did you have something?
No, but I can.
Okay.
I can.
Janet was pointing at you.
And the word of inspiration, if Michael cannot.
Okay. I think maybe we may have, before we get going, we're gonna have our substitute inspirational opening from Ron Feast, and we'll put Michael on the hook for next time. Mm-hmm. He did offer, so.
So hi everyone. I am filling in the role for Michael Eden Hill, who I think would have rocked it today, and I believe that. But I think we typically do a moment of inspiration at the start of every PCEF meeting, and one that I think comes to mind, I think in this moment in time, as we think about where we are on PCEF, comes a speech from Martin Luther King in the lead up to the sanitation worker strike. So I'm going to read an excerpt from a speech he gave on March 18th of 1968. It says here, "You are doing many things here in this struggle. You are demanding that this city will respect the dignity of labor. So often we overlook the work and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is it is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. One day our society must come to see this. One day our society will come to respect the sanitation worker, if it is to survive. For the person who picks up our garbage, in the final analysis, is as significant as the physician. For he doesn't do his job, diseases are rampant. All labor has a dignity. But you are doing another thing. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this city, in this rich nation, and receive starvation wages. And I need not remind you that this is our plight as a people all over America. The vast majority of our people in our country are still perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of the vast ocean of material prosperity. My friends, we are living as a people in a literal depression. Now you know when there is mass unemployment and underemployment in the Black community, they call it a social problem. When there is mass unemployment and underemployment in the white community, they call it a depression. But we find ourselves living in a literal depression all over this country as a people. Probably should end there. It's a long excerpt. Probably ended on a sadder note, but I think it gives me, inspiration in a moment we are trying to recognize the value of labor, and especially in construction and the clean energy world, and what this initiative aims to do. And the same struggles we hear in 1968 are still the same struggles we hear today. So I'll end with that note. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranfeast. All right, I'd like to invite Janet Hammer up. Janet's a member of the PCEF staff and is going to give a brief overview of the kind of the topic of today, and then we'll invite the first panel for workforce development up. Go ahead, Janet.
That is a hard one to follow.
Push the button.
Yeah, thank you, Ron Feast, for sharing that and reminding us why we're here. So tonight we are focusing on workforce and contractor equity. And I'm going to just give a really brief overview to remind us where that shows up in the legislation and is guiding our work. And then the rest of the evening we'll be hearing, oh, can you go to the next slide? Sorry. We'll click. And then the rest of the evening will be, well, not the rest of the evening, but the rest of this section we'll be hearing from our panelists. So as you recall, PCEF legislation articulates the intent. Its raison d'etre, its purpose is to provide a consistent funding source and oversight structure to ensure that the City of Portland's Climate Action Plan is implemented in a manner that supports social, economic, and environmental benefit for all Portlanders, including the development of a diverse and well-trained workforce and contractor pool in the field of clean energy. Next. So most of you have seen the graphic. Can you give me the next one there? So the legislation talks about the funding pools, and so we know that 20 to 25% of the PCEF funding is allocated specifically to workforce and contractor training and development. But there's another piece in where this is attended to in the legislation. So there's a legislative requirement that all grantees, so you've heard the part about the 180% wages and the piece around rent stability where investments are made and purchasing U.S. manufactured on solar and renewables unless cost prohibitive or unavailable. But there's also a requirement that recipients of funds must agree to sign a workforce and contractor equity agreement. So there's investments that goes specifically to doing workforce and contractor development, but anybody who's receiving funds in any of those buckets is needing to speak to how they're advancing workforce and contractor equity. Next. There's another piece of the legislation about a workforce and contractor equity plan. So the committee is thou shalt create a workforce and contractor equity plan that has measurable and ambitious goals, both around workforce and around contracting. And progress towards those goals will be monitored, displayed, and addressed if we're not on target. Next. That reporting is mentioned, as I said in the last slide, it's called out, but there's also specific language around adopting a methodology to measure, track, and report on the effectiveness of the program, including developing a diverse and well-trained workforce and contractor pool. And fund recipients need to be reporting on their success in meeting the stated objectives. So those are elements that are in the legislation. So behind the scenes, staff and a couple of the committee members have been working on thinking about how are we going to operationalize that. So we've been working on that. And one of the first things that we did is in January, we had kind of a small group design session to share our general approach to how we might think about the workforce and contractor equity plan and agreement. We had great attendance, a really wonderful group of folks, more than we thought it would be a small group of 20 where we could roll up our shirt sleeves. We had 52 people show up, and they gave really positive feedback that it was heading in the right direction, and almost all of them wanted to stay engaged and have another work session. So in April, we're planning to have, again, pending what coronavirus looks like and some sort of feedback session. We were hoping we'd be in the room together, but it might be virtually in the room together. But there'll be another opportunity to kind of workshop where another iteration, and then you as committee members are going to have multiple points workshopping that in your work, particularly in April, and I think the April 23rd session. So we're not going to get into that tonight, but I just wanted to make sure that folks in the audience and the committee members that haven't had as close of a touch point to that piece were up to speed or remembering, since we don't every day read all the legislation, what the pieces are as far as what we're required to do and where, again, that intent and purpose is. And then now we're going to take some time to, maybe I think there's one more. So we're just going to break the evening up roughly. So we've got some fantastic folks to share their perspective on the workforce component, the contractor component, and Tony's graciously dancing between the two because Verde's got a piece to speak to on both those sides. So I'll pause there and we'll bring the first panel up.
Yep. So I'd just like to invite one person from Work Systems, Steve Sims from Bureau of Labor and Industries, Pat Daniels from Constructing Hope, Kelly Kupkak, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, from Oregon Tradeswomen, and Tony DeFalco from Verde. And I think we need one more chair. I know. It's
a little tight back here. Okay. One more.
All right. We'll be all set. Great. Close to the middle.
These chairs are so heavy. I don't know.
Hey, how you doing? And doing that. Safety first.
You're first.
You want to see this positive.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andrew McGough. I'm with Work Systems, and we didn't follow the instructions, so I brought a couple of my team members along with me. But we did understand time constraints, so I'm going to zoom through this.
So you can advance by pushing down.
Oh, well, thank you. So thank you, first of all, for inviting us. When we were super excited about PCEF and the implementation and just the benefits that's going to provide to the community and the environment. Just an awesome opportunity and very appreciative of being invited. I'm going to provide like 100,000 plus view of Work Systems and then the public workforce development system. And then my colleagues are going to come by, and like any good executive director, they're going to really talk about specifics. Mine is going to be more general. So Work Systems was established in 1998. We're designated by the governor as the Portland Metro Regional Development Board, Workforce Development Board. We're part of a national network of about 500 workforce development boards. We're one of 9 in the state of Oregon. This means that we're eligible to receive certain pots of federal and state money to do workforce development in Washington and Multnomah counties. Last year, just for some context, that was about $13 million. While we're technically a 501c3, we often think of ourselves as sort of quasi-governmental. It's in part because of our connection to that federal and state system, but it's also because we're governed by a board of directors that's appointed by local elected officials from the city of Portland, Washington, and Multnomah County. So we're sort of like you all here in the PCEF committee. We do not deliver direct services. Rather, we're what's referred to as an intermediary organization. Our role is really around planning. So we develop a regional workforce plan. We manage investments in workforce development. Our job is really to coordinate and look for opportunities to bring partners and organizations together to improve services. We do a lot of development, both on the resource side and then at the organizational side to develop capacity in the region to deliver workforce services. We do a lot of engagement, both on the worker and the community side, as well as on the employer side. We have pretty extensive research and evaluation capabilities. And we have a sophisticated MIS tracking and reporting system. Probably about 40 organizations in the region use the iTrack system, and it's also the system that's used statewide to track a number of federal and state workforce investments. And of course, we're interested in continuous improvement, so we're always looking for opportunities to work with partners to figure out how we can build a better mousetrap. Our plan really governs what we do. I won't read through this, but we have 4 primary goals. This is a regional plan. We do it in collaboration with Washington County, Multnomah counties, and do a lot of work, especially on the industry side, with our partners in Southwest Washington and Clackamas County, because part of the issue there is the economy really doesn't function at the regional level or at the local level. It's really cross jurisdictional boundaries. Finally, just a quick overview of the public workforce system. In Oregon, it's called WorkSource Oregon. Locally, we call it WorkSource Portland Metro. And it's defined here by 5 centers, 3 of them in Multnomah County, 2 of them in Washington County. Last year, that system saw about 34,000 customers, so it's a big system. Many of them, most of them actually were seeking opportunity, many of them representing low-income and underrepresented communities. The idea really is that you get multiple agencies and associated programs co-located in these physical locations to create really a one-stop experience for job seekers, workers, and employers. And the primary agencies at the state level that are involved there is the Oregon Employment Department, Department of Human Services, Vocational Rehabilitation, and Adult Basic Education. So what we try and do is build on the capacity of that infrastructure and that system by working with community-based organization to meet people where they are, ensure cultural and population-specific competency, and improve the accessibility and success of the public system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, who's going to talk a bit more about community partnerships and resource connections, and look forward to your questions. Thank you. Push down.
Hi, I'm Patrick Gearing from Work Systems. And we were asked to offer some advice about the workforce portion of the Clean Energy Fund. I'm going to do that with a specific consideration in mind, and that's how to increase the success and strength of community-based partners. We know that's an important priority for you, as it is for us. Firstly, workforce development isn't just about skill development when serving people in poverty. Wraparound services are important for success, including services like housing support for people who are homeless or facing eviction while in program, childcare so that people in poverty with young children can participate. This is not a small group. The poverty rate in Multnomah County for single women-headed households with children 5 and under is 48%. That compares to 14% overall poverty for the county. So these aren't just factors to increase success, but they often make it possible for people to participate. Next item is to bring together public system partners to address wraparound service needs like the housing and the child care I mentioned, rather than taking from workforce funding from PCEF or other sources to pay for these in a standalone way or a way that could be duplicative. For instance, the housing costs could significantly cut into the workforce funding, and by going around housing system, one could be sidestepping the partnerships, ongoing funding, the services, the partnerships, the support, and communities of practice within the housing continuum of care. So our suggestion there would be that it's better to work together with other systems providing these services. Another is that many culturally specific and community-based organizations operate as consortia rather than as separate programs and contracts. That's definitely true in the area of workforce development, where consortia play a key role in the TANF Jobs Program, Economic Opportunity Program, and a network of pre-apprenticeship training programs. For these partners, working together is the default and usually chosen over individually competing. Also, these CBOs are often culturally or population specific and choose to work together because resource competition between them would translate to resource competition about which populations to serve. So our suggestion here would be to allow for awards that let organizations work together. Next, the industry work should be facilitated so that a broader group of community-based partners can engage more easily. Sometimes our partners are specialized in re-entry or serving homeless or are culturally specific services, but not necessarily on clean energy or other industry pathways. To facilitate their inclusion, we take on essential aspects of the career and industry work and connect them to it, rather than having our partner CBOs independently develop training pathways, industry convening, linkages to employers, and so forth. So our suggestion there is to facilitate that work to make access easier. And the final one is leverage additional resources to increase workforce training and employment services. We think it's important to balance the headline projections about the funding, which I thought it was 25, but it looks like it's 20 to 25% of the workforce or the funding going to workforce development. So it's a quarter of the total, and just from our experience, workforce is deeply underfunded in our community. So some of our prior suggestions, like try to avoid taking the funding from the PCEF and putting it into housing, if it's possible to do that through partnerships with housing. Those are relevant here, but also try to connect to the broader workforce funding environment and the broader workforce program services available. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to move quickly. I'm Kelly Haynes with Work Systems. So I'm actually going to give a case study example of how this worked in the region, specifically with clean energy jobs, in my former role with Clean Energy Works Oregon, and how we partnered with Work Systems and other workforce development agencies around the state. One critical piece of ensuring successful workforce development investments is to develop mechanisms where the demand in the industry is tied to the investment in the supply of the workforce. So the percentage of the funding that goes, that goes to the projects and the employers, and then the portion that goes to workforce development, make sure that they talk to each other. So with Clean Energy Works, we had high road standards similar to the Contractor and Workforce Equity Plan, where our contractors had hiring requirements for their entry-level positions to hire from designated training providers. Okay, so I'm going to just shoot through this as quickly as I can. So we had designated training providers across the state whom we worked with to hold industry-specific trainings like weatherization and energy auditing. They only were eligible as training providers if they could qualify on two major levels: training to the needs of industry credentials and having a demonstrated history and commitment of serving women and people of color. We also connected our employers to on-the-job training wage subsidies through the state of Oregon and the workforce system for new hires that they were willing to train on the job. We also had scholarships for contractors to promote from within, specifically for women and people of color on their crews. And we did all this in direct partnership with the local workforce board so that we could plug into a larger infrastructure. And so our contractors had the access to the available local and federal workforce funding. So here's sort of a visual of that pipeline and that continuum. So recruitment and screening was led by community-based organizations. Over 40 of Oregon tradeswomen's graduates were hired by our contractors. And then those partnerships helped to fill specific weatherization trainings through events coordinated by Work Systems and our community partners to match up the most interested job seekers into these trainings. They would graduate and get placed with our contractors, and many workers also moved into registered apprenticeship with the electricians or plumbers, given their hands-on experience in weatherization. So we also proved that model with Work Systems in the Portland metro area and then took it across the state with Willamette Workforce Partnership, Clackamas Workforce. And so we were able to actually plug into ARA funding. Do you guys remember the stimulus? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of that funding through the Department of Labor, we were able to coordinate with the investment to help with some training costs. So the partnership enabled over about 16 of our contractors to connect with these resources, and they actually were able to find screened, vetted, trained, and diverse workers to fulfill their hiring needs as the work ramped up. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of moving parts and back-end coordination, but this coordination of the investment in the workforce supply that directly served the hiring demand in the market created stable employment opportunities for the community that we were all aiming for. I think that was more than a minute. Sorry. We also have a video, but we can wait till the end for that.
Yeah, maybe we can get the video if there's time at the end. Thank you, thank you. Work Systems, thank you, Kelly. The next they're sort of the next speaker, and I don't think that you have a presentation, is that right? Is Steve Sims from the Bureau of Labor and Industries. Sam is going to flash a little 1-minute sign as you're kind of approaching time, so you're close enough, you'll see.
Panel, so
Yeah.
apologies.
That's all right. We'll make it. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about the Clean Energy Works program that Kelly described, because that's kind of what a pre-apprenticeship program is. A lot of times when you're talking about populations that are not represented in the building and construction trades, you're talking about women, you're talking about people of color, you're talking about people who have not had access to role models to get them into the trades. In fact, the way most people get into the skilled trades, I shouldn't say most, a lot of them, is the FBI, families, brothers, and in-laws, which isn't a bad thing because they teach you. It doesn't have to be family, brothers, and in-laws. They can be mentors. They can be a school teacher, someone like that. If you're not lucky to have someone like that, maybe you have a relative, a parent, an uncle or cousin in the trades. But when less than 5% of the tradespeople in this state are women, you're not going to find many mentors. When you have less than, I believe it is 2% of the tradespeople in the state are African American, you're not going to have that. So what you need is a separate system to give you that same preparation that the friends, brothers, and in-laws give you. That's a pre-apprenticeship program. It lays the foundation for becoming a prepared candidate for an apprenticeship program, providing you with academic knowledge and skills training, but most importantly, success skills training, how to be a construction worker, a skilled construction worker, how to act on a job site, how to react when things aren't working right. And that's what pre-apprenticeship programs do. Our office reviews and approves all of the pre-apprenticeship programs in the state. We want to make sure they're legitimate. We want to evaluate the quality of the training. We want to evaluate the connections with industry. These things don't work if you train in a vacuum. You have to have a connection with the building and construction trades. And when I say that, I'm not talking about just union, but I'm talking about all construction trades so that you can create a pathway for people to go through. With respect to this project, there are no such things as green jobs. There are electricians who work green. There are carpenters who have green skills. There are plumbers who have green skills. No one is going to have a sustainable living if all they do is I shouldn't say nobody. It's hard to have a sustainable career if all you do is weatherization. So what you want to do is use these green jobs, these renewable energy jobs, to prepare people for the broader world of the skilled trades. That's what our pre-apprenticeships try to do, is prepare people to enter the broader skilled trades. Right now, we have 20 pre-apprenticeship programs in the state. 6 are high school-based, 3 are community-based, 5 are industry-based. I should say 3 community college-based, and 6 are run by community-based organizations. Talk a little bit about the big 4 in my mind, because they're all represented here. That's Oregon Tradeswomen, the first pre-apprenticeship program in the state, Constructing Hope, Portland Youth Builders, and POIC. And these are all pre-apprenticeship programs serving underrepresented populations, trying to give them that leg up in the trades. Pre-apprenticeship works because it provides exposure to industries and occupations that career seekers may never have had an opportunity to experience. It ensures that people who complete this program, at a bare minimum, meet the application requirements to apply for most apprenticeship programs. When you get out, at least you're good to apply. But more importantly, it makes you a competitive applicant because of that skill building, and not only the hard skill building, but the success skills. What does it need to sustain in the program? It allows these participants to start creating their own informal networks with the industries. All of our programs have direct contacts with contractors and apprenticeship programs. They go to training centers. They meet these people who might say, I remember that young woman who was at my shop. I want to give them a chance. I remember that young man who was in my school. So it's kind of creating a secondary network for them. These programs focus on employability. As a result of that, we require them to have either a memorandum of understanding or a working agreement with the pre-apprenticeship program saying, we will provide individuals with these basic skills that you are looking for. Will you, A, provide us with an opportunity to work with your employers, with your contractors, and B, will your apprenticeship programs help us build our curriculum? And finally, will you give our completer some kind of advanced standing if they apply for your program? It could be direct entry, which is walking right into the front door in a job. It could be extra points in their application processes. It could be taking an application from a completer even when the program's not taking it. We want to make these people competitive with the people who are already out there and then give them that little extra push because we're trying to create a partnership. The skilled construction industries like to talk about there's no one in the pipeline. They rely upon the pipeline by happenstance. My nephew, my cousin, my son, never my daughter. I shouldn't say never, but infrequently. So we want to say, here's your pipeline, and you need to participate in the process by informing what the pre-apprenticeship programs do. There are two major ways that PCEF can have an impact, and one is providing work experience on energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, just like Kelly talked about with the Portland Energy Trust program. They learn, so in our current pre-apprenticeship programs, they don't get a lot of time to practice their skills on an actual site or a project. They can do that with some of the renewable and clean energy work, with some of the retrofitting work. That is invaluable to them. And the other thing is that most of these programs, and again, they're trying to serve their constituents and provide workers for industry. They get scant direct industry support. They rely largely on grants and contracts. Sorry, I didn't have a lot of money this year, but
Bake
you know.
sales.
Bake sales, donations. So what a great way to build this pipeline by funding a portion of the pre-apprenticeship training and creating that door that underrepresented populations, again, we don't have that existing infrastructure. Pre-apprenticeship programs build that infrastructure. Happy to take questions after we finish our panel discussion.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to note that Michael Edenhill, who's a PCEF committee member, is also here at the table and get that on the record. Our next guest and panelist is from Constructing Hope, Pat Daniels.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm the Executive Director of Constructing Hope Pre-Apprenticeship Training Program, and we target formerly incarcerated. I'm going to tell you, back in 1995, when Pastor Henry Greenwich started this program, and I came on board, the first thing that everybody asked me is, why are you saying formerly incarcerated? You should look at another group. And I want to tell you today that I am so happy that you are making the decision to help underrepresented people. Does anybody in this room know anyone that's been formerly incarcerated? All right, so that's a lot of our friends and families that can have an opportunity to do something new. I just wanted to ask the question because there's been so many years that I've been asked to change the look of who we are working with. So if this is truly going to change the community, the one thing that I do want to add is to say the jobs that we are creating or the careers that we're creating, they must be a well-paying position. They must be at prevailing wage. If we're going to lift up one, we need to lift up everyone. So when we look at this work, Constructing Hope, as we work with formerly incarcerated people, it's important that someone who is low income, how long does it take that person to work at a minimum wage to get to where my neighbors are? I want to say, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago when they said the average Oregonian was making $77,000 a year. We are far from average. That includes me. I'm an executive director. And why? It is because of how we look at society and how we make decisions. Nonprofits, every day, we are running in a hamster wheel. We are chasing dollars constantly to do the work of the community and to help raise the people in the community to another level. Now, within these programs, we're not just training. We're actually sharing life experience with these people. When you come into either of these pre-apprenticeship training programs, we're teaching life skills. When the average person goes to prison, and I'm going to say the average person of color is going to prison at a young age, it's 18, 19, and they're getting tried as adults. When they come out of prison 8 years later, and the average person is getting 8 years, and the average person that goes in for 4 years gets another 2 years tacked on to it while they're in the system, is something that we should be ashamed of. But that's who we are. When these people come out, my job used to be, as a human resource person, was the box. I am so glad we finally banned the box, because until then, when we look at all the homeless people here, that's those people who never, ever had an opportunity for employment. So today, we target formerly incarcerated, we target homeless, and we target 100% low income. Now, what we do for them is, again, we teach life skills. We teach financial management. We teach construction culture. As Steve said, we're doing everything that we can to prepare them to be successful in the trades. But once they get there, they also need to make a prevailing wage. And what is a prevailing wage? The average wage in the area. It is not the highest, it is not the lowest, it is the average wage in the area. So with that being said, how long is it going to take somebody at the average wage to really move to that sustainable living place that we see everyone else at, that we just are looking through the window? So I want to go back and just say, in construction, pre-apprenticeship is getting people ready for apprenticeship, and we do everything that we can. The wraparound services that we've received money for are absolutely necessary. When this program started initially, we were getting people in the trades, but that was all we were doing. We were getting them in the door, and then they were falling right out. And so it's like, so there's a two-edged sword. Part of that says, oh, the people of color, they're just not ready. The other part of that is they're not ready because the cost of childcare for 2 kids is about $3,800 a month. I want to tell you today, that's more than my mortgage. So why isn't this person ready? Why is that person late for work? Let's look at all of the barriers that they have to even get to that job. You know, when Martin Luther King talked about sitting at the counter, it was wonderful to sit at the counter, but we couldn't afford the meal. This is the same position that we're in today. So I'm going to go back and say pre-apprenticeship training programs, we're bringing in these people. We're giving them 10 weeks of training where they're getting hands-on training. They're going to site visits, because you know what? I can't apply for something that I don't know about. If I've never seen a plumber, I don't even know what a plumber makes, and I don't know what they do. So how do I know that that's anything that I would ever aspire to be? They're getting 6 to 7 site visits where they're getting hands-on training to decide what trade they want to be in. Our biggest joke is when we see people come in and everybody want to be an electrician, and then they go to sheet metal. Now I've signed up for sheet metal. You know, so that's our biggest thing, and I can say probably the same for Kelly, and especially our young women. So at Constructing Hope, we bring in women, we bring in men. We also introduce youth. We have a summer youth program. Why? Because when the kids of these, when these parents, kids see them, it's amazing how the pride that they feel that, like, my son is picking up my hard hat and he's wearing it because now I see dad doing something constructive, because he's never seen that before, and I want to be like my dad. This is the beginning of that fathers, brothers, and in-laws. And it was a very, most exciting thing that happened at my program is when, I don't want to name a person, but he worked at Home Depot. 8 years working at Home Depot and 8 kids, he finally got to $30,000 a year. Who can take care of 8 kids on $30,000 a year? And this was only 5 years ago. This man today is in the trades. He was our first FBI. His youngest son came into our summer youth program because he saw what his dad was doing. He came from the youth program into the adult program. From the adult program, he got into the trades, became a carpenter just like his dad. Within 1 year, he was making more than his older brother. Guess what the older brother did? He also came into the trades. So I want to just end on a note of saying this is a perfect opportunity for creating FBIs. But also in this group, I want to tell you, since 2002, we have 8 young men that have become contractors. So don't think that just because they're going through training that they're not having the opportunity to move further.
Thank you so much. Kelly?
Thank you. Everyone's always afraid to say my last name because they want to say Cupcake. Anyway, which was tough when I worked in the field as a heavy equipment operator. I got that a lot. Anyway, thank you very much to the Portland Clean Energy Fund committee for being here and inviting us to participate. And for all of the folks in the audience, I think it's really always inspiring to see folks come out and give up their time to talk about this work that's so important. And I can't really say anything more than my brothers and sisters and siblings, colleagues have said already. Maybe Tony's going to say something magical, but probably he will. What I do want to say is that I feel really privileged to be part of this discussion because at Oregon Tradeswomen, what we do is we serve folks that identify as women who are underserved in an industry that can and should pay really well. Nationally, women only represent 3% of the skilled trades here in Oregon, in large part due to these partnerships with folks here in the room and folks outside of this room. We represent 8%, and 80% of the women in skilled apprenticeship trades here came through our program. So we're really proud of that, and we work really hard to do that. Thank you. And why we do it is because it's not just because construction jobs are cool, it's because they provide family sustaining wages for people. They are pathways out of poverty. They are pathways into prosperity. And every single day that I see someone come through our class and come back and talk to us about all of the things that they were able to do, because in 8 short weeks or 192 hours of our program, they now have an opportunity to reinvest in the community, come off a SNAP, come off a TANF, provide for their families, buy that house, get a car to get them to that job. And I will just tell you very briefly, because I don't really talk about my own story very often, but I was a single mom on food stamps with a college degree in social work and 2 little itty bitty kids, and someone told me about a pre-apprenticeship program, and somehow I thought that some person with no skills whatsoever could go and work in construction, and I did. And I went through the pre-apprenticeship program, and I went into an apprenticeship program, and I became a union heavy equipment operator, and I made more money digging in the dirt than I did with my college degree, and I thought my first check was wrong because it was so much money. But through the support that I received from a program like ours, the ones that Steve mentioned and that Pat runs, and that our colleagues not in this room tonight run, I was able to get the skills I needed. I was able to get the support I needed to work in an industry that didn't want me. Because I had men tell me I did not deserve to be there, that I needed to get the hell off the job site, and that I was taking someone else's job. And when we talk about triple bottom line things, when we talk about the environment and the economy and equity, I know y'all know this. It cannot just be about a beautiful plan that sounds so lovely. And when Ron Feast talks about worker equity and dignity, it can't just be words, it means action. And we work really hard to ensure that folks that aren't represented in high wage jobs and high skilled jobs have that access. And so I just want to say really quickly, we work really closely with Work Systems as our workforce intermediary partner. They bring us together. We can leverage dollars that way. We can leverage collective expertise. Our programs have some nuances, but we mostly do the same thing. And when our program is full, we say, hey, Constructing Hope might have an opening, or POIC or Portland Youth Builders, and we figure it out. And we don't just train people and send them off, because once they get to that job site, that's when the hard work begins. Because that first day that you're really proud to be there is also might be that first day. We hope it's not, we pray it's not, but it might be that first day someone tells you you don't belong, and they don't say it in a nice way. So they call us, and we take those calls, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, 6 in the morning, when someone's scared and sitting in the parking lot and trying to walk the courage to walk on the job site, because it's about retention, and it's about support, and it's about community coming together to ensure there's opportunity. So I really just want to thank the committee for your thoughtfulness around the way that you're going to be doing in the investment, and the way that you're bringing folks together to really make a difference and shift the narrative and shift how we do business here in the community. So thank you.
These are very tough acts to follow. Well, hi, my name is Tony DeFalco. I work for Verde, and it really is an honor and a privilege to be here in such a great group of people, both the folks on this panel and the panel to follow, and of course the committee here. And it is kind of a dreamy moment for me, to be honest. To be sitting here in this place that was created by the Deltas. And, someone who was really special to me, who's passed, Chris Poole-Jones, and to have worked all those years to transform this place, to transform a decrepit gas station into something that's the pride and joy of that sorority, and is now such an important place of our community. and to be talking about the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which has been just a dream for so many of us for so many years, and to have worked so hard for that, and now to be here in a place where we're ever closer to manifesting. This is that what you talked about, Ranfis. We're manifesting, we're operationalizing not just dignity for workers, but a holistic approach that is taking care of this place that we call home, that was stewarded by Native people so well for such a long time and has been despoiled by so many for such a long time. And a justice-based approach that says we're restoring, we're making right what's been made wrong, and we're investing in people that were purposely disinvested in for so long. And so I thank you all, and I thank the incredible work that's going on here. So I just want to share a few thoughts. Is it down, I think. Oh, down. Okay. And I'll try to keep the high notes, but also just make sure you have some detail to guide you as you continue to deliberate in terms of creating the plan, the standards that are going to be so critical, and know that we know that your charge is tall. The order in front of you is tall. We know, and we appreciate the good work and continue to seek partnership with you. So as I mentioned, I work for Verde, and our mission is to build environmental wealth in communities through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. And we've done that for many years, 15 years here in Portland now. And so we operate social enterprises, and I'll talk a little bit about the social enterprises, and I'll kind of switch back and forth between workforce and contracting, and that'll hopefully bridge us to our next panel. And I may go over a little bit, but I was told I had permission to do so, so I'll take advantage. Okay, so we operated a social enterprise called Verde Energy, which I think is germane to our conversations here today. We operated it from 2010 through 2013. It was really a response to community needs around creating jobs, reducing energy costs in our communities, low-income people and people of color communities, and carbon reductions. And you can see the goals. You can see some of those outcomes up there. And I think what is important to highlight here relative to that particular social enterprise and what's in front of us is the steep challenge around energy efficiency. And it's been referenced before, and I think our friends at Boley said it's hard to have a sustained job in energy efficiency, and that's what we felt. But I would highlight that there were reasons for that. One of which was the drop-off in funding. So when the ERA money disappeared, a lot of us disappeared. The Clean Energy Works Portland pilot, and that built into the Clean Energy Works Oregon. We spent a lot of time, and we secured a $4 million grant from the Department of Labor to do workforce training across the sector. And when that ERA money dried up, a lot of the contracting community was hit really hard, and in particular those led by low-income people and people of color communities. And so the lesson there is, this ability to have consistent funding over time in prioritizing frontline community serving organizations and those that are serving frontline community serving organizations really can alleviate some of that ups and downs that we saw that really just went on a down and we weren't able to recover from. That's one lesson learned from that. The other is, and that this goes to the high road wages, is that we need to pay high wages and have training subsidy for folks that are coming into that. And I think, again, the stringing together of resources that we all do in the nonprofit sector, we're constantly chasing funds. Often those funds are project specific. They're not general operating. They don't provide management support that you desperately need to be able to, whether it's case management or whether it's creating the training program and creating training curriculum. It just is more expensive than ever before, and you really need to have that nice portion of that grant or of that revenue. And, we were able to realize really good wages in the Verde Energy enterprise. But ultimately, those management costs and training costs were really hard to realize with the margins that are there for energy efficiency projects. And I would just stress that the margins on energy efficiency and as well as solar are razor thin. And so the need to have the kinds of cushion that grants can provide is absolutely critical. So I'll talk a little bit about another enterprise that we've operated now continuously since 2005 called Verde Landscape. This is responding to, at the time in 2005, what we saw as the green divide. So we saw Portland as a leader in sustainability, but folks of color, low-income folks were being left behind. Jobs weren't coming to our communities. The investments, whether that was stormwater or light rail or increased transit, weren't coming to our communities. No big headline there, but what we tried to build was a bridge, really bridging between those economic opportunities that were related to environmental opportunities into communities of color and low-income communities. So we built this social enterprise as a workforce training program. And with those goals you see up there. And I guess, the kind of the key highlights to share, again, this is going to be refrain. So I'm trying to keep it simple, consistent funding, multi-year is critical. So it's hard to build a business plan on single years worth of funding. And while we operate these social enterprises as businesses that operate underneath of a nonprofit banner, what you often see in the places where you have low barrier to entry positions is you see razor thin margins. And so generating margin off that to pay for those soft skills, wraparound services, management costs, and then just your overhead and increasing benefits and fringe costs for employees is extremely challenging. And part of the reason why I think you see a fairly thin bench, not just in Portland, not just in Oregon, but across the nation when it comes to serving the most vulnerable members of our community with these kinds of programs. And so our lesson there was both multi-year funding, but also non-project specific funding. So one of the things that we'd like to see in the grant program is for there to be general operating support. It's really critical for organizations that serve low-income folks and folks of color to have that kind of support to be able to not just deliver existing programming, but then also the next thing. It's that innovation piece that you see come out of our communities, but it comes out of places where you have margin and you have the ability not to just run on the hamster wheel, but actually sit back and think and come up with some exciting new schemes like the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And then that steady commitment. I think the other thing we learned both in Verde Energy and we've seen to some extent in Landscape is when that commitment to equity waivers and public sector goes to low bid or they scrub out the social equity from the RFPs. And it doesn't happen necessarily by design or by nefariousness. It often can happen just by neglect. And we don't have time to be there every day reminding bureau directors and bureau managers about, hey, equity, equity, equity. I feel like there's been marginal progress in our city on this front, but what we see is a constant backsliding where it gets instilled and it doesn't get institutionalized, and it's subject to the next administrator or the next director that comes in. Am I doing okay on time? Okay. So a couple quick slides. So Verde builds social enterprise that focuses on increasing minority and women contracting in the environmental sector. You see some of the goals up there. Lessons learned, I think I've started to build themes here. Avoid lowest bidder opportunities and social equity outcomes. Procurement should invest in and fund social enterprise utilization. And then just that this social enterprise model is a proven model. And I think what you'll see both locally and statewide, not just in part to PCEF, but also increasing interest from our folks like Red F who are starting to build presence here in Oregon. And you'll see this happen in California is commitment of state funding to starting to lift up social enterprises. I'm just going to highlight Coley Park real quick. This is sort of an example of what happens if you can make long-term commitments and multi-year investments in organizations. They start to build capacity and they can take on bigger things, whether that's program delivery or projects. And what we were able to do after 15 years of slowly building Verde Landscape was to build a 25-acre park in one of the most park-deficient neighborhoods in Portland. And it wasn't just like a piece of nice, clean dirt. It was a landfill and had 3 governments that were responsible for the operation and management of that landfill. And we had to raise $14 million to build the park, but you can see the outcomes. To us, that's what we want to see. That's the exciting thing, the promise of this program in terms of being able to sustain investment in organizations over time is the ability to grow and lift to bigger and bigger projects and programs. So I'll conclude with just a few thoughts about how to build better workforce and contracting systems, invest, 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 and it's all those kinds of capacities. No thing is too small. We really encourage detail in some of your thinking about equity plans here. It's insurance, it's bonding, it's financial systems, human resource systems, pay equity, getting and keeping good talent. All those things are really challenging for organizations like ours to be able to deliver on a day-to-day basis. And so the ability, again, some of that's general operating, but some of it may also be some shared resources that can serve multiple organizations in terms of HR or financial systems and so forth. Encourage a building of a shared learning space for these lessons learned. I think there's been some talk about that. Kelly and I had a good, exciting conversation about that recently because this whole just transition thing, while it's real, it's also very challenging to navigate in terms of the workforce contact. And that doesn't mean we don't do it. We're doing it. It's happening. We can lead because we have a resource like no one else in this country has. And I've been on the road in the last 4 months, it seems like, and I've delivered this talk around PCEF to audiences from Atlanta to DC, and everyone is just pretty jacked up about this. And so we just have to perform and show how you can do it. And then last, just a couple of details. Allow for multiple grants. So one organization can get more than one grant. Allow for multiple grants to partnerships and members of partnerships. And I heard that consortia term over there that our friends at WSI. And then very high scrutiny of non-frontline community-led proposals. I just want to be really crystal clear. My mentor, a longtime person I learned from, Maxine Fitzpatrick, closer the group is to the beneficiaries, the greater the benefit. So let that be a guiding principle for you. Thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you, Tony. I just want to say one other quick thing. That when we talk about investment, right, a lot of times people think like they're putting that money in and then it's going to the agency and then that's the end of it. But if we do the math of the folks that we serve and the reinvestment that comes back into our region, and I'm not good at math, but it's a lot. And it's important to think about it from that framework. So I just wanted to say that piece about reinvestment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone. We do have about 15 or 20 minutes for some questions, answers, comments. If any of the committee members have anything that they would like to ask this group, I don't want to ask everyone to kind of shuffle out and then try and shuffle back in. Robin?
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and insights today. Many of you here today and many of people that came to present in previous weeks representing other nonprofits and other industries have espoused the benefits of multi-year operating grants. And I get it. Having been a former executive director, I get it. I guess the question I have for you is multi-year operating grants, the cost of that could be potentially lack of accountability, right? If you give a grant a 3-year grant, maybe year 1 goes well, but what happens in year 3, right? So I'm curious to hear from you, how would you propose keeping your organizations, accountable for these multi-year grants?
Sure, thank you, Robin. So a couple thoughts. One is, I think I'll speak for our own organization. We have been very consistent performers over time in terms of delivering in those rare occasions when we have multi-year grants. And I think we've often exceeded the deliverables in the grants. And I think that while those aren't always incorporated into the grant proposal. For example, one of the things that we worked on for many years behind the scenes was building that capacity toward Coley Park. And so I think you want to leave some room for groups to not have measurable accountability around how they can grow. And then I think there are ways in which it's really important to dig into some of the details around organizational development in particular, and how growth of financial systems, human resources, even strategic planning, DEI planning can frequently be measured pretty easily. But often organizations do not have specific funding for those things. And so I like to say that, for general operating, you talk about what you're doing, and you talk about some specific things that you want to achieve, in particular around back office. And then you also just continue to blow people out of the water with really good performance over time.
Thank you. Did we have another response from up here? Can you actually come up to just sort of speak into the microphone? That would be great.
I was actually going to add that point to my section too, but cut it for reasons of time. But, some things I'd add is that from the participant point of view, the trainee or the person in the workforce program serving the most barriered populations, we do a lot of work around homeless and reentry. It's a long-term service that you're providing someone. For an annual award, by definition, the average person is getting 6 months of service because these are rolling. No program just goes and gets 40 or 50 people on day one. In fact, usually up front you're a little lower because you're getting the word out. So if you have working with someone who's stabilizing, formerly homeless, you're going to need quite a long time. I would say in our programs, a year and a half is, typical period of time to serve someone to go through all those steps. And for an annual contract and having someone in the program 6 months, you can't stand behind the job seeker. A lot of times we would just choose not to take an award like that. It's one thing if there's no guarantees of funding, but we would not want to enroll people, tell them we're going to walk with them through their career to the point where they're stable, and then let them go, abandon them. And when you bring in things like housing for people who are homeless, in their middle of training, it means that they're put in a position where they could potentially be homeless too, just because the contract ended. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to have continuity of services, especially with very low unemployment right now. I would add staff stability. It can be incredibly destabilizing. So we have grants that run several years. Sometimes we secure federal grants that run several years, and staff start to leave when they see the end of the grant coming because they want to figure out what the next thing is for them too, and that means customers are impacted. So it's very destabilizing from the program standpoint, and that affects the job seekers also. So service design, staff stability. To your question about how to ensure accountability, we issue contracts typically annually, although we don't say at the end of the year there's no re-up. We have partnerships that are really successful. If they aren't meeting goals, we will work with our partners to be able to meet those goals. It could actually be the case, in theory, I've never seen it happen, but a really terribly performing contract, just out of due diligence for public resource, wouldn't even go through the first year if something was really, really amiss. So I think you just want to manage it from an ongoing standpoint and not look at a year interval as the only time where you can support a contractor or partner in being successful. So that'd be our feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Robin, I think it's a really important question around accountability and multi-year grants. And so as everyone's heard that those multi-year investments are really critical to provide the space for innovation and responsiveness. But also, I think there's a way to ensure that reporting is happening on an ongoing basis. So you're not just getting year report one and then 2 years later. But also, as Tony mentioned, having a shared community of practice or a shared learning community, then you have folks that are working together and solving or working through problems and challenges as a grantee community in the space to figure some of those things out, and being really interactive with you as the funder. Like, our best funding comes from from funders who don't just write us a check and say goodbye, send us a report when you're done, but funders who show up, come to our graduation, show up at our during our training, who talk to our team, who talk to our graduates, who talk to folks who didn't get in our program. So funders who are invested in those outcomes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add? No.
Well, no, I would just say a perfect example of what they're talking about is, again, I'm dealing with formerly incarcerated. In 10 weeks, people can become homeless in those 10 weeks because of the services that we provide, because we are providing monthly reports. They're seeing the results of the folks that are going to work because we're checking in monthly, but also this is where the services came from. They were not there 5 years ago. And so, but because we've had the consistent funding, we've been able to address problems because I'm going to say 5 years ago, who was talking about supportive services? Probably just us. But that's what's necessary, and that's where it came from. And the last thing, too, is we just talked about pre-apprenticeship training programs. We're not a for-profit organization, so the pay that we're paying, I'm going to tell you, when we're training people, we're losing our staff because we don't make enough money or pay enough money to sustain the workers to keep doing the work. So an ongoing grant, as he said, if when the funding ends, the workers are leaving as well. So that puts us in a position to also maintain the staff at a level that we can continue the work.
Thank you. Maria and then Ranfis.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing data in the form of personal vignettes, success stories, and other important statistics for us to better understand the work that you do. The theme around the importance of the consortium model and collaborations seems more clear tonight than it has been in like other themed hearings that we've had. And I would really like to know more about how do you make that work if other people in other sectors are listening and also interested in continuing to strengthen that kind of dynamic? How do you do it? Is it in the form of MOUs? Do you all meet and talk about grants you're applying for? Do you step up, step back? I just want to understand some ways that you can do that. And for the folks listening who are interested in what you are all doing, how can they continue to follow in that model?
Do you want to talk first?
Yep, sure. I mean, I will say that it is surprising and inspiring to be in a community where folks who are pushed in this the natural environment makes us competitors in this way of very scarce resources and funds, but because our commitment to social justice, economic justice, gender justice, and racial justice brings us together, we partner. Pat and I and Joe and Jill and other folks, we come around together every month and we talk about hard issues and we look at the work as an opportunity to collaborate, and we work through work systems on many opportunities and they help us and we brainstorm stuff. I mean, if I just share this really, if you don't mind, about like as Pat said, personnel, like I have to bribe people with cake all the time. It doesn't always work. But, you know, and then we sell it at the bake sale. But Pat just lost a staff person. And so like our CFO was like, let's get over to constructing help. Let's make sure their invoicing doesn't stop. Let's get that rolled in so Pat can get paid and pay her team. And like, we do that all the time. We share resources. Like someone will call and be like, hey, there's this grant. Did you see it? Let's get together. Let's figure out how we can collaborate. How can we go yell at Steve Sims together when we're upset with Boley? You know, we work, sorry, Steve, we know we love you. But really, it is a community of practice, but it takes intention and it takes a commitment to collaborate on behalf of the folks in the community we're serving, to have integrity in the process and not just the outcome and the product.
Thank you.
No, I think you said it in a nutshell that we figured out early on that we got more together. I cannot write grants and run my program, and I can't survive off just grants. But when I'm in a collaborative, everybody's putting a little bit of work in for the greater good, and we found out that worked.
Kelly, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'll just echo what our partners are saying about, as the workforce board, we don't do direct service, so we really do rely on our service providers and their success. So we really just try to kind of on the back end assemble the right funding, or, you know, I know with Constructing Hope and Oregon Tradeswomen, they're part of our Economic Opportunity Program. So they get some rent assistance every quarter for their students, but Human Solutions manages that. So it's a way to not need to have your own in-house rent assistance program that would take a lot of work to know which landlords and which units are available, but we connect them with that resource with Human Solutions. So I think as the Workforce Board, we really want to work on the back end to uplift those consortiums and help support and grow their capacity to succeed, because the work they do is so vital to actually getting those outcomes that we see. So.
And I would just add one quick thing on the environmental side. I think, you know, over the last 15 years, what we've seen and we've been very active in being part of is really engaging community of color serving organizations around the fact that there are resources in the environmental sector, and that our community serving organizations should be getting those resources to serve community in the way that communities need to be served. And that sort of kind of came to its height here in the Portland Clean Energy Fund, but it's also, you see it in the Coalition of Communities of Color and the Environmental Justice Program there. And, you know, the work of Living Coley that Verde has spearheaded in the Coley neighborhood. So I think you see also very collaborative on the side around communities of color thinking about how to access and how to start to integrate resources. And this is also where we see the need for that continuous learning to go on, so that what works, what doesn't work, what failed, what, you know, works for the next time, and what collaborations. We're in at least 6 different coalitions right now around specific environmental projects ranging from energy to transportation and everything in between.
We are running pretty close on time, so I would like to get to Ranfis, Jeffrey, and now Shanice's comments or questions, but if we can keep maybe 1 or 2 people respond for the group, and we'll try and wrap it up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Ranfis?
Well, I just want to thank all the panelists for coming here today. Definitely left a lot of information for us to chew on. I think it's really been really valuable. Kelly, I want to jump on something you had said around retention. Are there any considerations we as a committee can think about as we construct this? How do we not just build the pipeline and maintain the pipeline? And I think we've heard some good comments around how we structure our grants, but how do we land around retention? Like, how do we make sure that people stay after day one?
Thanks, Ranfis, for asking that important question. So retention is a big piece of the work. As Pat mentioned earlier, it's not just about getting in and then we walk away. It's about investing. And so if you're looking at an apprenticeship model, you're talking about a 2, 3, 4, or 5-year apprenticeship. So folks really need that support once they get in. And we all run supportive services programs and retention programs. So we talk about informal mentoring, formal mentoring, networking and support groups, ongoing professional development, leadership development, and technical assistance. My colleague Jay is in the room, and we are out and talking and, you know, to our industry partners all the time about what can you do better to ensure that when folks get to your doors, whether you're an employer or an owner or an apprenticeship coordinator, is your place safe for people of color? Is your safe place for trans folks? Is your place safe for women? Because if you don't have your stuff together, look at me, I didn't cuss, Jay. I'm so proud. If you don't have your stuff together, folks aren't going to stay, right? You're not going to stay if every day you get in your truck and cry on the way home because someone harassed you or, you know, scared you or threatened you or put a noose on the job site. So investing in that piece, right, like Tony was saying, it can't just be a 1-year program. It's really got to be this way to sustain that work. And, you know, stipends is a piece we talk about all the time. Right now, our program, we haven't had enough bake sales to afford stipends. So women quit their jobs to come to our 8-week program. So now that we're finally in a building where we have our own workshop, we're able to offer classes at night, which we're super excited to start this summer. But those are the things that we think about all the time and try to problem solve and talk to each other all the time. I mean, we have an informal community of practice that tries to you know, get to those resources. So thank you for thinking about that. And I think the way that you craft the RFQs and in your process is to include that kind of investment.
Thank you. Jeffrey?
Thank you all for being here. I guess this question is mainly for Kelly and Pat. What role do contractors play in ensuring workforce diversity, and how do we as a committee help identify those kind of contractors?
Okay. I think the contractors play a huge role in workforce diversity because it's how you bring the people on board. And I'm going to say I thank COLAS for bringing on some of my graduates. And first of all, if the contractors come into the room, our training facilities are right here in the community. So when the contractors come into the room and they actually get to see the people, when you come to Constructing Hope, yes, 60% of the folks right now are formerly incarcerated, but if you were in the room, you're going to pick the wrong ones to say that they were the ones who were formerly incarcerated, which sometimes we feel like we have we can't deal with them. When contractors come in and talk to them, you become humanized. And at that point, I can work with you because you've welcomed me in a way that I know that I'm welcome to come there. The guys who are formerly incarcerated, it's confidence. We can train people all day long, but when they walk through that door and I'm not feeling welcome and I'm already used to that, it's a huge thing for contractors to come into our class. Those are the people who get our graduates. And I want to say, even when we are building folks, and I want to thank MCIP, because when we're building contractors, did anybody recently see the news? Akeem Griffin was just on there and he was one of our graduates. That's one of our graduates who is a contractor. And it was somebody who gave him the opportunity, and I want to say somebody from MCIP that encouraged him to take that step to go forward because he felt like in the industry, he had worked hard enough, he had enough knowledge, but it was a contractor who said, you can do it. So I'm going to say contractors play a huge role in if you're giving them the opportunity for leadership, and if you are welcoming them on the job site and coming into the classroom and letting them know it. Come speak at our graduation. We're always looking for people to speak. And mentor.
Right.
Mentoring is huge.
And one other quick thing I would say about our partnership and relationships with the contracting community, because they do play a very important role, is that we need to be aware of what I believe is a false narrative around small contracting firms not being able to pay prevailing wage. And it's really critical, and I think it's our obligation to help lift up women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, emerging and disadvantaged businesses, so that they can do that, right? Because why are we going to invest in building up businesses that are just going to low road our workforce? There's a disconnect there, and I'm not a contractor, but I've worked in this space as an advocate in construction for almost 2 decades, and I've seen it work when there's right investment and right intention.
Thank you. Shanice? Oh, sorry, one more thing.
If you work with any of us, this is the connection. We never lose track of our graduates unless they stop talking to us. We ask them for a lifetime commitment. So as a contractor, it's a perfect place to get someone from because they never lose that case management piece. If you're having an issue with them, call us and we can talk to them and we can make those connections.
Shanice?
Just echoing a thank you to you all, and I think the themes tonight are really tying together things that we've been processing really strongly, and how we move forward, focusing on this piece of social enterprise and making links between the true folks who need to benefit from this work and the folks on the front lines doing this work. I think a couple of things are coming to mind, and we are talking a lot about this idea of capacity building for folks in this pipeline, in seeing apprenticeship programs as a vital part of that. And I'm curious about how we think about this continuum as well. Journeymen in particular spaces, and how Black, Indigenous, or people of color, how you might have learned and supported work in this realm of accountability, or thinking about hiring practices or requirements, if you will. And so I think those lessons will be really strong for how we think about moving forward. And also I'm curious about labor partners and how folks might collaborate, and what would just to say it, like what lane, right, what that might look like, and recognizing institutions or folks directly coming from the public sector. That's definitely a space where we want to engage differently. and center the work of communities of color. But how do we do that in a way that might leverage / collaborate with our labor partners in some of these conversations about presentation trainings or different core areas of capacity that could, I'm not sure what that looks like, but those are some thoughts that I'm having.
Well, I think, first of all, having the discussion with all of our partners about how we build capacity, and if we can have a successful conversation, there are outcomes that come from that. So this kind of goes to Jeffrey's question. If we're building this ecosystem to support underrepresented populations, and these contractors want to do this work, there's accountability there. Yes. So we have to, and we haven't talked about this, is who is a responsible contractor who might be taking on this work? If they're not supporting the efforts of all of our partners here, then maybe they should not benefit from this work. So it's a much broader discussion. I think right now we're really at the front end, loading the people into the pipeline. But how do we come up with agreements and contracts that make sure that contractors are cognizant of this same conversation and they only get to play if they're willing to engage upon it with our agreements?
And then I want to add, when we set up training, contractors are involved. My training is not something that I came up with. It's the training that the industry said they needed. And so they approve our curriculum. So the contractors that are giving us the curriculum and helping us create that curriculum, I do expect you to take my people on the other end.
Right, Kelly, and then I think we need to wrap up this session.
I was just going to offer that I think having accountability on the project side with any contractors that are doing the work and disaggregating the hours worked by apprentice and journey level, because what that does is it helps disaggregate the diversity, not just for the lowest paid or the, certain trades or the apprentice level, but it signals to the market and to the employers, oh, we have to retain those people if we're going to hit our journey level goals too. So we found that to be really helpful. It really gets the contractors' attention to, if they're going to be held accountable to it and it's going to be enforced, then there's follow through on that. So.
Yeah, if I can add just one thing real quickly. When we talk about holding the contractors accountable on a project, that's one of our problems. Frequently, we hold them accountable on a site, and they will meet that goal for that site, and then they will take their single woman and move them to another site, so the workforce never expands. You don't grow the pot of diversity, you basically just move it around. So I think we need to approach the industry on industry goals. How are you going to change the face of your workforce to reflect our community?
Yes.
Just to add one last piece for Shanice, I think it's also not just about it is about accountability, but having those numbers and that data also helps if you are setting up an oversight committee or an accountability committee, so we can problem solve. Because it's not about pointing fingers at a contractor or a provider or an employer. It's about us together figuring out how to get through those barriers or remedy the issues or where the problems, or if we're not meeting goals, how can we do better together?
Thank you all, and I just thank you again for coming out and for sharing your expertise and your experiences, and I think this certainly won't be the last time that this committee hears from all of your organizations and probably each of you individually, so thank you again. Yeah. I think as we transition to the next panel, and if you're on the next panel, please do come up. I just wanted to note for the folks in the audience that we do have some guiding principles that are out for public comment right now, and there are forms where you signed in for public comment and for where you signed in just to say that you were here. And there's also note cards that have the link to where you can give public comment online. Sorry, thank you.
You have a presentation.
That's why I couldn't open up on mine. It wouldn't let me do it.
We do need to transfer it because we need to So we need to.
Okay. Okay.
So I just pulled this up because I forgot my actual newsletters. So I guess when I go, if I could just say, can you scroll down?
Sure, sure.
Help me do
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. And Katie, we've met before. I just wanted to, sorry, and I'm not shaking hands.
All right,
on
got it,
your
got it. No
elbow.
worries.
Yeah, that's right. All right. If I could ask everyone, do you hear me? I'm not sure. If I could ask everyone to find a seat and wrap up your conversations. No? I don't think it's on. It used to be a lot louder.
Hello?
No. I'm testing your mic. Hello? Nope.
Check, 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 check.
Am I on now? Oh, I am on now. If I could get everybody to wrap up their conversations, we're going to get started with our second panel. All right, I still hear you in the back. All right, our first presenter on this panel is Nate McCoy. And, okay, we did get it up. Excellent. So if you want to just, Nate, kind of give me a nod when you want me to scroll through. Oh, okay, excellent. You're in control. And make sure that press the button so that you have a green light.
All right, I will kick off the second panel by thanking everybody, like everybody else has, for having us here this evening. My name is Nate McCoy. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon chapter of the National Association of Minority Contractors. And what I would like to do is actually go back 51 years. We just last year had our 50th anniversary of our organization, which is the only national organization in our state representing minority contractors. And why I say that is because NAMAC, in its evolution 51 years ago, was started out of Oakland, California during the Civil Rights Movement. And I don't need to remind people what came out of Oakland and California and other places. But it was a call to action because at that time, the members of NAMAC band together because organized labor was freezing African American and minority contractors out of work. And not just as companies, but as workers on public projects. And so what they decided to do was to band together with the Native American community, the Latino community, and the African American community to create their own brotherhood, because it was clear that there was a brotherhood of our white counterparts that was not allowing people to have access and opportunities at the same levels. So 51 years later, NAMAC now has 24 chapters across the U.S. in some of the most diverse cities in America, which are Atlanta, Chicago, L.A. We have 2 chapters in L.A. Where else? Philadelphia, and I mean, the list goes on. And what I pride myself in is standing on the shoulders of those who came before me, and being a Portland native and working in the whitest city in America. I'm prideful to say that we are the fastest growing chapter across the U.S. and really creating the blueprint for our national footprint. NAMAC Oregon is an organization that is a membership advocacy-based group. We have 3 main goals and objectives, and I'm pretty pit bullish in all 3, but the 3 are advocacy and support, which is really taking on the needs and the concerns of our minority contractors at various scales. It can be, and some mentioned it in the last conversation, it could be these policies that our state has a very poor history of isolating people of color out of all kind of business concerns. And what we take on is really building as much as we can those relationships with politicians, lawmakers at the Salem, legislator level. We spent a lot of time with multiple agencies talking about the language that you put into these procurements, and we heard it earlier. Procurements usually are the signal to what an agency really wants and is intentional about. And as somebody who for 10 years before coming to NAMAC 4.5 years ago, I was a construction manager with the city and saw it firsthand. The egregious behavior, the unaccountability to following up with the goals. I mean, a lot of people know about the Good Faith Effort Program. It was coined with the city, the Good Fake Effort Program, which was really about calling people and not really building a relationship and then saying they're not available for work. And I built a big name for myself before coming to NAMAC by demything that, by actually getting involved with a NAMAC and actually getting out of those 4 walls of government and building relationships on my own to just see, was this the case? And I can tell you most times people would tell me, that person didn't call me, or when they did call me, they didn't call me back, and somehow I popped up on a list as not available. So I took it upon myself to start working with our commissioners at the city and saying, we got to do something more. And so 4.5 years ago, NAMAC found me, and at that time, the organization had about 15 members, had changed leadership at the board level, had no staff, had no, real estate or kind of storefront. And now we have three spaces, an incubator. MCIP is getting ready, which was our technical assistance arm of NAMAC, to support our members. We now have real estate that we control and operate and give real meaningful programs and products to our members. That's the first. It was the advocacy and support to our members. The second is the technical assistance trainings that we're doing for our members. I forget who mentioned it in the last, but the technical assistance needs a small business on the CPA side, on the getting loans from banks side. These are real things, and sometimes I argue that the money should be just as adequate as anything that we would see on the workforce development side, because I work with 63 contractors at NAMAC, and I can tell you that some of the trainings that some of our members are getting outside of NAMAC are not really training them for the times that are coming. There's technology advancements, there's equipment purchasing power that needs to happen. There's also like the fundamental relationship building efforts from those who work in really big companies, training small business contractors in an inferior fashion. And I've seen it firsthand to where it makes somebody at a small business level feel demeaned when somebody treats you as if you as a small business owner don't know what you're doing. And I always ask them, do you tell them, like, you know, you work in this big company, but have you ever put your house on the line? Have you ever got a line of credit? Have you ever went through something that a small business is encountering daily? And usually the answer is no. So what we've intentionally did at NAMAC around trainings is trying to train the trainer. And anybody who works in government, you know, there's equity trainings all the time. But we flipped that on its head and said, we want to do 360 trainings. We want to make sure any trainer in front of our members is adequate and empathetic of where these people come from and how to build a relationship so that they can be honest when they're in those rooms about what they know and they don't know. Because I've seen it a lot where people will just sit in the room because there's a big prime that they want to work for, and they don't want to let those folks know that they're inferior in some areas of business because that could be held against you. And so what we've said is, well, given that NAMAC is strong with relationships and having our own contractors who lead a lot of major projects, let us get in the room with those trainers and figure out how we can make sure that they are authentically engaging and training our members. And it should be two-way, because our small businesses know what they need and they know how they communicate and learn best. So we're trying to train people to really respond to the need that's out there. And we control our own incubator too, which we lease space to 4 of our members at a $350 rate who operate businesses at their house. And again, a lot of contractors will want to come to your site and see your facilities. And if you're running a business out of your house, I think sometimes people perceive that you may not be the business they want to work with. So for those who need it, we provide that and we support that. The third is we hold bi-monthly contractor meetings where we provide opportunities for our members to network with the bigger agencies as well as bigger GCs, and they gather together to learn from each other and to literally figure out how we can, you know, work on projects that the city is having. We also do contractor assessments to make sure that when I'm out or any of our staff at NAMAC is out talking about our businesses, that people know and are aware of their capacity, skills, and opportunities to build capacity. I heard that earlier, which is a huge need for these contractors. And I agree with the workforce group. The workforce pipeline needs to be as big and as bold as the contractor capacity building efforts. We have over 5 to 10 billion getting ready to hit this city and this state in the next 5 to 10 years. I can tell you there's probably one minority contractor in the state who might be able to take a big scope out of a $1 billion project. That's a shame that we talk about a single Colas or a single Raymore, and we don't have 10, 20 that can speak to being at a sizable scale to compete in the real market. So I think the conversation for me today is really about waking people up and waking legislators and politicians up. And I love what PCEF is doing because this wasn't a government effort. This was a people effort. And I think that is what's needed to continue this discussion and these programs and these opportunities. And I'd say one more thing about NAMAC and just kind of the work that's happening. We are also trying to make sure that we take on contracts to help owners and GCs deliver. I heard Robin talk about accountability. We work with agencies and contractors to hold them accountable, not the contractor who's performing the work per se, but the ones who are intentionally saying that they're going to write this equity plan and these agreements, and sometimes they deliver and sometimes they don't. So somebody has to hold them accountable and make sure the owner knows if they're really performing at the level they expect. So NAMAC's niched itself into a role where we really do help advocate, support, and enhance the public dollars that are being spent to make sure that minorities are not left behind. I believe in taxation without representation because I see it all the time. And I feel like we need to make sure that people know we're not asking for a handout, we're asking for a hand up. And I think that in this current state, we have two contractors, one sitting here and Jeff Moreland, who have set some records across our state for the biggest single contracts ever awarded to a minority contract in our state's history. And to me, that's worth clapping about. And we want to see others who do that, because minority contractors at the highest rate employ more minority contractors than anybody, minority workers than anybody in the industry. And I feel like there needs to be more of these site visits that the pre-apprenticeship program spoke about, so that people of color can actually see people of color as professionals, not bouncing a basketball, not running with a football, but actually seeing professionals that they can actually quantifiably become and aspire to be. And I see Sam with the yellow sign. There's a whole bunch more I would say, but I want to appreciate the rest of the panel, but I thank you guys for having us here today.
Thank you, Nate. RJ?
It's Randy. Everybody always thinks it's RJ.
Sorry.
Because there's no
RJ
periods in there.
Construction, Randy.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm just going to give a little history, I guess, of my background and how I got to this point, a little bit about on the contractor side. So I was born and raised in Portland. My mother and father came here illegally in 1975 with my older sister as an infant. They crossed the border. Somehow, after I was born, my parents purchased 3 or 4 rental properties, and my father passed away in 1980. And I don't know how, but my mom, with her very minimal English, was able to keep these rentals and rent them out. I remember my sister always helping her with paperwork. This is how I got involved in contracting, plumbing, electrical, sheetrock. I saw a picture of this skinny kid putting up a light fixture. I was like, who the hell is that? And it was me. And I laughed. I was 15 years old. I was like, man, I guess I've been doing this for a while. So that is what got me into contracting. I got into the union electrical apprenticeship in 2002. I started my business in 2006, just doing handyman work, rental property work. I turned out in 2007, and I had my side business as well as my electrical day job. So the side business was actually like a full-time job, even though I called it my side business. But we grew every year. My goal was to be an electrical contractor, but we do all kinds of scopes: roofing, painting, remodel, renovation. But my construction side grew so much, I didn't start up my electrical division of my company until about 5 years ago. So recently we picked up a job at Portland Building to help their renovation there. We had electrical scope and painting scope, and I guess I'm proud to say it wasn't planned this way, but it was completed by 100% minority labor with my company. I actually worked the job as well. We had some issues getting female labor there. I guess I should have outreached to women in the trades and things like that, but the electrical side is very, I guess, difficult to get women when you need them, unless you have a call for a long time there. But I lost my train of thought here. So the Local 48 actually asked me they told me what PCEF was about as I was driving to the office one day. And, they said that there's nonprofits involved, training involved, trying to develop youth, low income, green energy, all these things. And I told them, I go, wow, it seems like you guys developed this program, or you guys for us, because this is kind of the core of my values. I feel like I love educating my staff. I've made a commitment to all my staff that we'll pay for college classes. I told the English-speaking people I'll pay for Spanish classes. We have a lot of Latinos, Mexicanos that work in my company. I've told the Spanish speakers we'll pay for English classes for you if you guys want to take it. Unfortunately, no one's taken me up on it, but there's hope. So I'm really into development and training, and this program seems really, really great, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it. And I'd love to hire more African American, more Latinos, more low-income people, and get them into the trades. The trades are lacking youth, and it's a very well-paying job and doesn't get you into college debt. I've got 3 sons. My son's 19, is an electrical apprentice for me. I have a 21-year-old son who works in my construction division, who is about to get in the electrical trade hopefully this summer. And I have a 23-year-old who's got his bachelor's in architecture. And he works for me too. And they're very happy to be working for me, which is rare for kids working with their parents. But So I think that's all I have. I just want to give you a little background for me, and I'm just looking forward to hopefully being involved heavily with this program. So no yellow card, I'm done.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
No, we're back on track now. So our next presenters are Maurice and Kenichi. Yes, I wrote it phonetically. From what is the name of your place?
PBDG.
PBDG. Yes, it's the acronym. And O'Neill Electric. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and you can get started, and I'll put this on full screen.
Great. Well,
Do you have the clicker down there?
Yep. Awesome.
You just have
I'll
to.
let you control the clicker.
Okay. So
How's
push
that?
down to advance. It's a little counterintuitive.
I see.
There you go.
So whilst we're prepping that, one of the things I'd say is I'm Maurice Rumming, president of O'Neill Construction Group, O'Neill Electric, and Howard Jacobs Masonry. Also an IBEW member, so since conception, and also signatory with a lot of unions locally. And one of the things that with a lot of the apprenticeship programs, it's looking at working with your unions to create more diversification because they're the ones that are training. We have 65% of our employees are women and minorities, but we are a small company of about 75 people. And so if we can get some of the larger ones to look at that same thing, then we could actually move the needle. But when I was asked to speak here today, one of the things I thought of is like, okay, what do contractors need? And so it's not really about necessarily my company, but what we see out there. And I couldn't help but say, you know, PBDG, I need to invite them and Kenichi as well to this conversation. Great, thank you. So my name is Kenichi, and I'm the executive director for Professional Business Development Group, PBDG. It's a bit of a mouthful. A little bit of history about myself. I've spent the last 12 years in commercial lending. I've worked with businesses kind of the size of the, you know, the what the room is talking about. And so I've kind of seen firsthand what the industry looks like from the lending perspective. And I joined PBDG a few weeks ago because I really believed in the mission. I am a minority woman and I am an immigrant. It's one of those situations where when you start to look at the profile of this organization, you'll understand why I joined PBDG. It's interesting, we have a 6-year history. It's not quite as long, and we don't have a lot of institutional track. Most of the time when you find an organization that has a lot of women and immigrants, it doesn't quite have longevity, right? We don't have the history of native roots of Portland. And so PBDG is a group of people who just came together and said, let's get it done. Let's get more minority folks, let's get more women, let's get more immigrants, and give them the same opportunity that they might not necessarily have. So that's a little bit about our organization, and I'll kind of dig into what we do, but that's my history and why I have a very strong affinity for PBDG. When you're talking about representation, it's creating space. It's creating space for everyone and what that looks like. So let's kind of delve in. One of the things, am I doing this right? Perfect. One of the things that we immediately kind of recognize is need. And I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 different types of needs in the construction industry. One is historical inequities in construction industry. I think the apprenticeship folks did a fantastic job of some of our slides here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but really when you start talking about prevailing wage, I'm a huge advocate for prevailing wage. Everybody needs to get paid fairly, and we need to hold everybody to the same standard. And because it trickles to families, it trickles to community, it trickles to building wealth. And when you start having disparity in who gets paid what, and you don't have a benchmark or a measure to kind of to level that up, then I think we start really pushing the wrong buttons. This is data, because years of training as an analyst, you get comfortable with data, so I'm going to share a few things. I'm going to click this. Perfect. I'm going to click it again. Why don't you be the clicker? I'll be the clicker. Okay. The bottom one? Yeah, you're the contractor. So nationally creating inequity would create 9 million jobs if minority business ownership were compared to white rates. It's when you start talking about the billions, it's interesting what starts to happen in our community, right? Because billions are reinvested in communities that have not seen that money come before. And then we bring it to our jobs. Again, the apprenticeship folks did a fantastic job, so I'm not going to spend too much time in this, but addressing the recognized shortage of skilled construction labor is a huge need. And we see what happens when you have an aging workforce. 17% of the workforce is at or near retirement. That's 1 in every 5 workers. That's a big number. So, locally, if all public projects over $15 million in the next 5 years hit 25% goal for minority and 14% for women, that's what would happen, right? So when you start talking about impact, this is measurable impact about what will happen if we kind of meet our goals. So how do we address these issues that we're facing? So a huge part of it is structural and historic barriers created by institutional bias. When you've had the luxury of being a 5th generation or a 10th generation Oregonian, you can kind of navigate the system. When you are fresh off the boat and you don't have the connections that you need, it's a little harder. And so we need to make sure that we are creating systems that allow everybody to have access. And that's one of the things that we are trying to do with our contractors. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. We're going to find a way to give you access to training. We're going to find a way to give you access to the right room, right? Because a lot of times folks don't have access to the right rooms. They don't have access to the right bankers. They don't know who their bankers are. They just are not supported in the way that a business should be supported. And so PBDG is trying to fill that void. We create pipeline for workers and businesses who have been historically excluded by effective and measurable trainings for small businesses. So I'll talk a little bit about our training center. In the 4th quarter of 2019, we very proudly opened a training center. And I did 3 tours before I signed on. I just kept coming back. And my boss at the time was, okay, why do we keep going back here? There was something very special about that training center. It was a place where I saw a business being able to grow. We had a space where folks could come and learn. And not just learn the things about, how to run a business and finance, but learn from other people, because it takes a village. And when you surround one contractor with other contractors that are saying, you can do it, suddenly the things that were not possible become possible. And so our training center has built this community around our contractors, and we're offering classes on the technical assistant side. We're offering classes for the business owner. We're helping them kind of think through how they do business. Now, PCEF, this fantastic group, what will your funding go towards? I think Verde did a fantastic job of just kind of wrapping around how the marriage of the apprenticeship program, the contractors. We're going to be providing training and workforce assistance, contractor technical assistance. All of this is really, we want a COBID certified firm. And this is where my stance as an organization is very clear. We want any COBID certified firm that walks in through our door to be able to get the resources that they need. If you're working in construction and you're a COBID certified firm, and this includes bookkeeping, right? It includes cleaners, janitorial services. If you're a firm that needs help, we want to be able to provide that help, because at the end of the day, the construction industry benefits from having these services available to our partners as well. 1 minute mark. All right, well, let's fly through this. I'm going to let Maurice kind of talk a little bit, sorry I stole all of our time, about our alliances. One of the things that I really appreciated your question, Mariah. I apologize, I think I said that wrong. But
I'm going the wrong way.
When you talk about the support that alliances can provide, we found a group called Maui to be very beneficial. We work with that alliance to hear what our apprenticeship folks are thinking, and what the laborers are thinking, and what the unions are thinking, and we figure out ways that our contractors can tie into that.
And so what I'll do is I saw the 1 minute, so I want to be respectful of that. I want to kind of just go through some of these slides here because we do have time, and I think we got a little excited and produced a lot of paper. And so but this is an exciting time, right? So one of the things we do is one-on-one mentoring. So this is Pacific Mark, a lot of you guys know Mark Matthews, and he's mentoring a small group of contractors in a small setting. You also have it where he's actually given up intellectual property. So he knows how to run the $10 million, $20 million, $30 million projects. So he's actually sharing that with a group of contractors that come in to learn how to do that work. So we're really proud of our mentoring.
I'm advancing for you. I got it.
And one of the things I would say is that because the word got out, you could see we start to go over capacity in our space. Now, this is all privately funded, by the way.